Good morning and welcome to the Renfrewshire IJB Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee. This, as you know, is the second meeting of the committee that's been held remotely, and I must confirm that it is the first that's being recorded this morning, which is an important step forward for the committee. As you know, we are not able to hold meetings in public and at our usual location due to the government guidance on public health measures to tackle the COVID-19 emergency. Therefore, it's important that we take those steps available to us to make the proceedings of the committee open to scrutiny by all, and I can advise that the recording of this meeting will be available to watch on both the Council and the HSCP website following the meeting. Although most of you as members are familiar with the basic procedures to be followed for a meeting to be held remotely to ensure that the meeting proceeds efficiently, there are a couple of additional points that I want to bring to your attention. So it is even more important when meetings are being recorded that it is only one person who is speaking who has their microphone on. This is because in recording only the person speaking will be shown on screen and noise elsewhere can direct the picture to that source. For the same reason, it is important that there is a short pause between speakers to enable the camera to adjust to the new speaker. And also, most importantly, that any instant chat messaging on the show conversation side will also be shown in the recording, and therefore it's important that that is used formally and appropriately. Any members who are accessing by phone should also put their phones on mute. Before I move on to the agenda, can I ask the clerk to do a roll call of members so that it's clear who is present in the recording?
Yep. Thanks, Margaret. This morning at the meeting, obviously, we have yourself, Margaret Kerr, we have Dorothy Mackerlane, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Adam McGregor, Alan McNiven, we have David Lees, Sarah Lavers, Ken Graham, James Higgins, Andrea McMahon, Jean Still, and from Audit Scotland we have John Cornett and Mark Ferris.
Thank you, Elaine. So with that, we can formally start the agenda. So first of all, do we have any apologies this morning?
I haven't received any apologies.
Okay, thank you. And next, can I ask if there are any declarations of interest with regard to the items on the agenda this morning? I'll take that silence and a few shakes of heads that I can see as there are no declarations of interest. So that moves us on to the first item on the agenda, which is the minute of our last meeting, which was held on the 19th of June. I will work on the assumption that all members have received the minutes and have read them, and therefore at this point, if I can ask if anyone has any comments, just to raise your hand, please. No comments. I likewise had no comments. I think they reflect the meeting that was held and are a good record of that, and therefore I propose that we approve those minutes. Thank you, I'm getting nods. Thank you for that. So that moves us swiftly on to item 2, which is the rolling action log. Does anyone have questions or comments on the rolling action log? No, quiet from the members. I think there are a couple of things that I would just draw to attention, perhaps just so that we're clarifying. The second item that is on the rolling action log has been closed off. I think it's important to flag that that was provided to members of the full IJB in July, and therefore that item is closed. And today, we had anticipated having an update on the inspection of care at home, but that is now going to the IJB meeting in November. Can I just clarify, is there going to be follow-up to the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee?
Can I come in, Mags? Is that okay?
Thank you, Jean.
Item 3 will come to this committee on the 13th of November.
Thank you, Jean. That's helpful. Any other matters regarding the rolling action log? Okay, let's move on. So that takes us on to item 3 of the agenda, which is a report from the Chief Internal Auditor. Oh, I'm sorry, Lisa Marie, you have a question?
It's on this item, Mags, so I'll wait until Andrea's spoken. I think I clicked too quick.
No problem at all. I'll hand over to Andrea then.
Thank you very much, Chair. Obviously, the audit plan for the year was approved back in January, I think, but it also needs to remain flexible throughout the year. So in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, I have reviewed the audit plan and discussed with management whether there are other issues that need to take priority over what was already approved on the plan. So I'm asking for members' approval to remove the review of budget monitoring and to replace that with a review of supplier sustainability payments, which is a new requirement put upon the IJB by the government. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Andrea. Lisa Marie.
Thank you, Mags. A comment rather than a question, Andrea, but just to say it's something I support. I think while I think retaining our suppliers is incredibly important, but I also think this is an enormous financial pressure and something that we really do need to be reviewing and on top of. So I'm pleased to see it in the paper today.
Yes, thank you. I think that's basically it. It's recognised that it is a huge financial risk, and that's why we've proposed amending the plan. We're all proposing to commence the review within this quarter, so it will be started some point before December.
Thank you, Andrea. That's really helpful, and it's helpful to understand the timing of that it will happen relatively quickly as well, rather than waiting to the end of the financial year. Do we have any other comments or questions from members? No further comments. As you can imagine, I did have early sight of this proposed change, and I think it is a sensible one. So the committee are being asked to approve this change. We clearly are relatively limited in the internal audit resource that we have during the year, and therefore to commit, I think, to do this review properly, I think it rightly does mean that the original planned item will have to drop off the plan for this year. So I am comfortable to approve that, and just I'll take silence from other members that they're happy to as well. Thank you. So there's no other questions than that. So we'll make that change, Andrea, to the audit plan, and then we would look to get the report on that probably into early 21, I suspect.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Andrea. That's helpful. So with that, we will move on to item 4 of the agenda, which is review of the IJB's existing risk management framework. Who's speaking to this item?
I can do an update. I just couldn't get the mute button off. Thank you, Margaret. This report highlights the changes within which the IJB has been operating over the last 6 months as a result of COVID and the subsequent commencement of recovery and renewal. The risk management framework that's currently in place was approved by the IJB Audit Committee in November 2017 and revised the way risks were reported. Over the last 6 months, the Health and Social Care Partnership put additional risk management measures in place to quickly identify and manage risks related to the pandemic. These were reviewed and updated frequently and reported to the response management team and SMT. Going forward, the interim measures that have been put in place will continue but need to be adapted to align further with existing risk management arrangements. The service transformation work planned alongside the COVID response requires to be embedded into risk management activity. As such, the Health and Social Care Partnership believes that a review and update of the current risk management framework is required to reflect the impact of COVID. This paper therefore proposes a review of the existing risk management framework with the objective of bringing an updated framework to this committee for approval in March 2021 with implementation from April 2021.
Thank you, Jane. That's a really helpful update. Can I make one comment? I think David Wiley has joined the meeting as Jane was speaking there, so I think we probably just need to flag that for the recording. So welcome, David. I have hands up from David Lease and then open up to questions further. So David.
Thanks, Margaret. Just to kind of add to what Jean was saying, so I think people will be very aware that we've had a long history of having risk framework in place, and it is something that we've been proactive in both in tracking and monitoring and also addressing, particularly during periods where there's been real spike in demand or the weather or some other business continuity or civil contingencies issues. So winter being the normal one when we tend to review it with more scrutiny, but also when we've had issues like the very extreme weather in the beginning of March 2018, for example. But I think, again, members will be very aware that we faced a whole new set of issues, challenges, demands, with consequential risks over the course of the last 25 weeks or so, and we can't see those fundamentally going away, nor can we see them necessarily being fundamentally different. But we do need to kind of just take that time through until next March, just to kind of take stock of what we've got, review what a new, much more integrated framework will look like. And subject to what the audit committee wants, we're happy to bring back kind of reports on progress that we've made over that period, if that would be helpful, rather than just go from today and then suddenly appear with something new come the end of March. I know we've only got maybe one, maybe two audit committees in between now and then, but happy to bring updates on progress, but also to give members the opportunity to be part maybe of a process, and informally compared to these formal meetings, where we're engaging with the audit committee members to get your input to your involvement with that process.
Thank you, David. That's a helpful update to add a bit more detail around that. Can I invite any other questions or comments? I think particularly around that comment around the updates that this committee expect to see. I'd be interested to hear any thoughts on that. Lisa Marie. Lisa Marie, you're still on mute. Yeah. I
think I'm unmuted now. It's now also not showing me when my hand is up. Yeah, no, I would, and I suspect that you will all agree, I would quite like to see updates at the next couple of meetings, and I don't mean anything of, vast amounts of information, but to know what the progress is would be helpful, and I do think being able to just discuss informally would be helpful. It's such a big undertaking for the Health and Social Care Partnership and for David's team that I think that is a good way that we can support them through this process. And also I expect it's going to be quite different to the strategy that we approved in 2014. So yeah, I would like to see updates.
Thank you, Lisa Marie. David, your hand's still up. I don't know if you want to add more. I think for me this is it's worth reminding us that our risk management obligations are actually part of the legislation that created the IJB. So I think what we do need to be is mindful of our obligations in that and make sure we're fulfilling them, which I think this piece of work supports us to do. I think it's more a comment rather than a question, but we do need to also be mindful of the risks that are pertinent to the IJB as distinct to those that relate to the partnership activities and some of the operational aspects of risk that sit within the underlying organisations, and that in itself brings a fair level of complexity to it. So thank you for getting us to this point, and I think rightly we would look to get updates on progress and then with clarity by the end of the year. And therefore I'll work with Jean on that to make sure we've got that in the agendas going forward. So I think we are being asked to approve the review taking place and note the update on that. Thank you. So that moves us on to item 5 of the agenda. And actually I'll introduce items 5 and 6 together because they are reports from Audit Scotland that are relevant to both risk and our role as an audit risk and scrutiny committee and the wider issues that have been happening. I think if I ask Audit Scotland to introduce these papers, but not to talk us through them, I think work in the assumption that we're all capable of reading the papers in detail ourselves. But if I could ask perhaps if you just draw out any particular items that are relevant to us as an IJB, because I think what I don't want to say here's racing around that all of this applies to everything in this committee and everything that's relevant to us. So, John, can I ask you, I think it's you that's covering this.
Yeah. Chair, thank you very much. Take the point and had no intention of taking you through either paper in any great detail. I was going to make the assumption that the papers had been read. In terms of the first paper, I think I would just highlight that it is the second guide that we have produced in response to COVID-19 for the benefit of organisations. Although the guide is labelled a guide for audit committees, I think it's more generic than that and is equally applicable to any committee or to officer group or indeed the board level. So I wouldn't necessarily just see it as something being restricted to an audit committee. I think it's also in terms of the detail and the questions that are in there, it would be quite easy in many ways to either answer in a black and white way in terms of either yes or no responses or a simple factual response in terms of this is what we're doing. And I think the key thing for everybody, not just for the committee but for officers as well, is to actually consider the challenges and the questions posed by the guide in terms of how effective are our arrangements or how effectively are we responding to this issue, rather than a simple yes or no or a statement of fact. They are quite generic, the questions, and the guide is quite generic, and it's about pulling out the important things that are relevant to you, and that will vary IJB by IJB. So it's about tailoring some of the challenges in there to yourself. The other thing that I was going to say is that we're not in any way trying to put questions into the minds or put questions into the mouths of members of the committee. It's very much a guide to act as a prompt in terms of things for you to think about, and we're certainly not suggesting that there are issues at the IJB in relation to the areas that are within the guide. So it's something for you to use in a way that suits you best. Excuse me. So that's all I was going to say in terms of the guide, Chair. Do you want me to pause at that point, or do you want me to take the second paper and then come back to questions?
Let's just open it up for questions on that first paper. Does anyone have anything they want to ask John around? No, and I'm not overly surprised. I think the paper does draw together a number of things that I recognise, but it probably pulls it together in a helpful summary. So I'm not overly surprised that there aren't detailed questions on it. It does provide quite a lot of food for thought. Thank you, John.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. In relation to the second paper, just 2 or 3 things to highlight from that, if I may. Firstly, I think it's important to recognise that the paper was written at a point in time, and even in the short period of time since it was written, the world has moved on, and some of the detail that's in there will be different now to the point at which the paper was written. So it was very much around, or very much designed to summarise the point at a point in time. I think the conversation has now moved on away from actually what is the quantitative impact on the public sector in terms of the financial impact, and more a conversation in terms of looking forward to the future, in terms of what do we want to keep from the arrangements that have changed as a result of COVID-19, what do we want to lose that has changed, but more fundamentally, actually, what are the solutions to the financial challenges? So although the paper articulates some of the financial challenges, the conversation has moved on, I think. And to a certain extent, and in many of the organisations I'm working with, the conversation is now very much around, it doesn't matter whether it's 50 million or 52 million in terms of the size of the challenge, it's actually what are we going to do to address that, and what support is going to come through from Scottish Government, what support is going to come through from UK Government, and those conversations are now starting to develop and move forward. So I wasn't going to say anything more in terms of the paper, Chair, but again, happy to take questions on that, either on anything that I've said or the detail of the paper itself.
Thank you, John. I've got Lisa Marie's hand up.
Thanks, Mugs. I just wanted to say that actually I think, as well as what John's just pointed out, I think the paper actually is just a very good snapshot and shows very well the complexity of what the funding situation was for us even pre-COVID and how COVID has impacted on that. And I think for members to have it put together so concisely and in such a readable form is really helpful. There's some really key detail in there, and I just wanted to say thank you on that basis. I think it's really good from that perspective.
Thank you, Lisa Marie. Any other questions? Alan, yes.
Thanks, Chair. It's similar to Councillor Hughes. I'd be keen to kind of circulate. It was interesting to hear John say it's not really just generally aimed at like an audit committee like ourselves. To me, there's a lot of information in here that'll be really useful for third sector operations who operate boards, and just that understanding of public finances, I think is really, really positive to be able to share. And I'm assuming that's just available from the Audit Scotland website as PDFs, John?
Yes, it is, Alan. Or what we can do is, if it's helpful, we can just send a separate document to you that you can share. It's not, there's no confidentiality around it. It's publicly available, and happy for you to share as broadly as you wish.
That'd be useful. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Lisa Marie. Your hands up. Alan, likewise. If you can put your hands down, just so that I know. Thank you. Thanks, John. That is helpful. Although the accountant in me still worries between the 52 million and the 50 million, so that's an interesting perspective on it. But it is interesting that it's not the quantum of the number isn't the only worry, and particularly the interactions between organisations is a real focus now. So thank you for sharing that with us, and I think it will form part of the wider risks that we've been discussing and will be looking at as part of our risk framework as well. So thank you for your contribution there, that's been helpful. So that takes us to item 7 on the agenda. So Jean, do you have any comments you want to make?
I'll just go through the purpose of the paper. So the report is asking that the committee approve a change of date for the December Audit Risk and Scrutiny meeting. The reason for the reschedule is to facilitate the consideration of the audited annual accounts prior to them being taken to the IJB on the 20th of November. It is expected that the accounts are published by the 30th of November, so this is asking for approval to change the date from the 4th of December to the 13th of November.
Thank you, Jean. I think I'm sure the committee, like me, recognise that this is just a practical step that we've had to rejig to accommodate the year-end account sign-off. It allows a bit of breathing space for the finance team to make sure that we have considered and scrutinised the accounts, the audit output, and any matters as significant or otherwise that are relevant to that, with a little bit of a gap before they have to be tabled to the full IJB for signing. Because as you can appreciate, we're already well behind the timetable that we would have expected. So perhaps my final ask is, Jean, is if we can then have a review again of this committee's work plan going forward, given these changes, just to make sure that the schedule for the year ahead is sensible and reflects anything that might have been pushed back or not tabled. But I think that's a sensible change, and hopefully members are able to make that, because that will be one that is important that we're quoted to make a recommendation to the IJB to sign the accounts. So thank you, everyone. That nearly brings us to the end of the agenda. That was the last formal item. I would also like to draw attention to the fact that this will actually be David Wiley's last attendance at Audit, Risk and Scrutiny, if I'm right. I hope I'm right, because that's embarrassing if I've said that and it's not. We will have the opportunity to see you again at the next IJB meeting, but I guess I would like just to formally thank you for your welcoming me both to Renfrewshire IJB and this committee, and supporting with very helpful thoughts and contribution throughout. So thank you very much, David, for that. But you'll get your formal thank yous from the full board at a later point. But we won't have the benefit of you in this committee going forward. Thank you, David. A man of few words. I could tell you were saying thank you.
Sorry, I'm muted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other items before I say thank you to everyone? No, I can see lots of shaking of heads, and those that I can't see shaking your head, unless you put your hand up, I won't see you, I'm afraid. So thank you all. That was we got through plenty there, and good to see some good progress being made. Thanks to the executive team for pulling that together, and we will have a busy agenda next time to go through the accounts. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a good day.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.